If people can distance themselves from stories and religious interpretations of Scripture and actually explore the possibility that Scripture lines up with and accurately describes what we know today regarding history and science, an amazing thing happens. We can take religion and spirituality out from under the umbrella of superstition and into the reality of life in this universe. There are gaps in many Jewish lists of genealogies. In Christian study Bibles, there are notes that help readers to realize, for example, that the word Abba can mean father or ancestor. This helps us to recognize gaps in generations and unknown gaps of time recorded in the Scriptures. The popular notion among many evangelicals that the earth is 6,000 years old ignores these gaps. It's strange that this group of Christians would do such a thing in light of seeming contradictions in genealogies contained in the New Testament Gospels of Matthew and Luke. In these Gospels, there are glaring differences in the ancestors of Jesus listed. Now, these differences are not contradictions at all. In fact, there's no way that these could be a complete list because you wouldn't cover the time period from Abraham all the way to Jesus anyways. So these are generational gaps, just like the gaps in the Genesis account in the Jewish Tanakh, and thus these are time gaps. So we can't know exact dates from Scripture, but we can see through the recordings of key events that the Tanakh lines up with the reality of science and history. Therefore, science and history can help to estimate when certain events occurred, and in turn, Scripture can continue to impress us by accurately depicting events at the appropriate times and in the appropriate order. Before I continue, I must give props to an organization called Reasons to Believe. In the early 1990s, when I first heard some of these ideas, it was a major step in recognizing the accuracy and validity of Scripture. A very good article is available on their site that covers information discussed here, and now a scientifically and historically accurate account of the universe from 13.7 billion years ago until today, as recorded more than 3,000 years ago and contained in the Jewish Tanakh. Now, the Hebrew word yom can mean day or long period of time. Due to various contextual clues, the meaning in this Genesis account of creation of the universe is not a 24-hour day. Yom, or day, is different key periods in the past 13.7 billion years. In the beginning, God created the heavens. This came out of nothing that was seen. The remarkable early inflation of the universe and the efficiency, low entropy of it is quite impressive. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless. Earth emerged in the third generation of galaxies at about the 9.2 billion year mark of the universe. Initially, it was formless. Over time, this spinning mass would defy the odds, and likely it collided with another smaller forming body, which became our moon. The collision, going at just the right speed so as not to be catastrophic, allowed us to capture an unusually large moon, a very unusual but vital necessity for advanced life. It tilted us at an ideal 23.5 degrees and slowed our spin rate down so that the timing of human beings 4 billion years later would coincide with perfect spin rates of the planet, perfect luminosity and steady burning of the sun, and a plethora of natural resources. The earth was formless and empty, or void. Initially, there was no life whatsoever on earth. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. This was due to dense cloud cover like that of other planets in our solar system. The oldest book in the Tanakh, Job, in it, God claims he made the clouds the earth's garment and wrapped it in thick darkness. Job 38:9. Also of interest is the meaning of the phrase surface of the deep. Early on, Earth was very hot and cooling. The surface would have been molten and in liquid form, but not water. As time progressed, and with more collisions with space debris, Earth's crust would form. As more time passed and more of the dense cloud cover was dispersed and temperatures cooled, condensation would occur and eventually heavy rains. The Earth then could be completely covered in water prior to the ultimate emergence of continents. The Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And then something interesting happens that is incredibly insightful, or perhaps just lucky. a different verb was used instead of the verb created. And God said, "Let there be light." This Hebrew verb implies that the source of light, our sun, would already have been in existence, and that now we would start to experience light, day, without still seeing the light source, and accordingly, Earth would experience night. So night and day. This would coincide with the Hadean era, with many collisions from asteroids and the breaking up of the dense cloud cover on Earth. And there was evening and morning, the first day. The Jewish day ends at sundown and begins with evening. So we have the record of day 1, roughly a 10 billion year period of time. Let there be an expanse between the waters to separate the water from water. God called the expanse sky. So day 2 is the period of time in which the atmosphere forms and a water cycle is established. Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let the dry ground appear. Day 3 is the period of time in which the landmass works its way up out of the water due to volcanic activity and plate tectonics. Near the end of day 3, the passage mentions the emergence of seed-bearing plants. Now this potentially presents a bit of a deviation from what science originally claimed. However, there is evidence that shoots like reeds with seeds emerged just prior to 1 or 2 last asteroid strikes that would open up the complete cloud cover enough to see the sun and moon for the first time. Day 4. Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night. God made 2 great lights. So the sun and moon finally become visible from the surface of the planet. God did not all of a sudden make the sun and the moon. This again is why the writer did not use the Hebrew verb used in verse 1 describing the brand new creation. He again uses the Hebrew verb depicting that something already in existence is now evident. Day 5 discusses the emergence of sea life, but then becomes controversial due to mentioning the emergence of birds, seemingly too soon chronologically. The chronology of the progression of life in the Tanakh with the progression of life proposed in modern-day science can be in agreement with the detailed study of the Hebrew terms used and an in-depth understanding of the scientific record. One thing to keep in mind is that the text in the Tanakh regarding the progression of animal life is not an exhaustive record, and the vague use of terms in strictly defining the animals discussed makes it impossible to conclude contradictions and impossible to verify accuracy. If interested in such information, I would defer you to the Reasons to Believe site and its resources, including initially to the article mentioned before. Humans arrived on the 6th day, the 6th yom, or period of time. Humans are very new to Earth. Hominids arrived roughly 7 million years ago, but humans much more recently. Many choose to ignore science and claim that these must be 6 24-hour days. Others accept science and claim that the Genesis account is inaccurate since it supposedly claims 24-hour days. But the end of the passage gives us an important calibration that allows us to recognize that Scripture is in harmony with science. In the Genesis account, there is mention of evening and morning of every day, every yom, from day 1 through day 6. Remember, in Judaism, the day begins with evening. The passage finishes mentioning the 7th day in which God rested from creation. It does not mention, and there was evening and there was morning, the 7th day. By implication, we are still in the 7th day, the 7th yom, or period of time. These are not 24-hour days. And others can argue about evolution and what role it plays, including a reference in Genesis 14, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds." I may discuss some things later in the other videos regarding micro and macro evolution, but as a statistician, let me be clear that it is folly to believe that pure natural random chance dumb luck can orchestrate so many things in nearby space and on this planet, including well-timed mass extinctions and repopulations, to produce the kind of planet with its perfect timings and conditions for human life. The recognition that something from beyond our space-time dimension is writing the script is by far the most mathematically appropriate conclusion.